In a move that stunned the world, a single decision sent shockwaves through global markets and diplomatic circles alike. The world watched, breath held, as the headlines broke across every major network. Canada froze all oil exports to the United States overnight, an act that seemed unthinkable just days before. The pipelines that had long symbolized trust and cooperation between the two nations suddenly ran dry, leaving oil terminals eerily silent. Prime Minister Mark Carney's announcement halted 4 million barrels of crude per day, instantly disrupting American refineries and industries. The impact was immediate and severe. Refineries ground to a halt, and oil tankers were stranded at the border, unable to cross. This was no bluff. It was a bold assertion of economic sovereignty, triggered by Washington's crippling tariffs on Canadian goods. The move was calculated, a direct response to what Ottawa saw as an existential threat to its economy and national pride. The once unbreakable energy partnership between the two nations was shattered in a single morning. Decades of trust, built on mutual benefit and shared prosperity, seemed to unravel in the space of a few hours. Panic swept through Washington as officials realized their long-standing assumption of secure Canadian energy was a dangerous illusion. Emergency meetings were called, and the mood in the capital shifted from confidence to crisis almost instantly. Gasoline futures spiked by 11% within 48 hours, and panic buying gripped several states. Lines at gas stations stretched for blocks as Americans scrambled to fill their tanks before prices soared even higher. Americans, used to seamless energy flows, suddenly faced the reality of their dependence. For the first time in generations, the average family felt the vulnerability of a supply chain they had always taken for granted. Carney framed the freeze as a defense of Canadian jobs and dignity, not an act of aggression. He spoke directly to workers, assuring them that their livelihoods and futures were at the heart of this historic decision. The oil freeze was more than a political statement, it was an economic weapon aimed at the heart of the U.S. economy. Billions of dollars were at stake, and the message was clear: Canada would not be bullied. The effects rippled instantly across the continent, and the crisis was only beginning. From Wall Street to small towns, uncertainty and fear spread as everyone wondered how long the standoff would last, and what it would mean for the future of North America. The era of taking Canada for granted was over. A new chapter in the relationship between these two nations had begun, one defined by hard choices, shifting alliances, and the undeniable power of energy in a connected world. Canada's move was years in the making, not a knee-jerk reaction. The completion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion in 2024 allowed Canada to bypass the US and reach global markets. In the months before the freeze, Canada quietly built up oil reserves and reduced cross-border flows under the guise of maintenance. Diplomats secured new buyers in Asia, ensuring Canadian oil would have eager customers the moment the taps to the US were shut. Tanker bookings from Vancouver to Asia tripled overnight, revealing a level of strategic foresight few expected. Canada hadn't just turned off the taps, it had built a new system to reroute its resources and shift the balance of power. The US was caught flat-footed. Practically overnight, the nation found itself in the grip of an energy crisis that few had truly anticipated. The shockwaves rippled through every level of government and industry, leaving leaders scrambling for answers and ordinary Americans bracing for impact. Refineries, built for Canadian heavy crude, couldn't adapt quickly, and alternative supplies weren't available. The specialized infrastructure that once seemed like a strength now became a glaring vulnerability as engineers and workers struggled to retool systems that had been optimized for decades for a single source. Emergency meetings in Washington revealed the Strategic Petroleum Reserve was a poor substitute. Its oil was the wrong type and would only last a few months. Officials debated rationing, but the reality was grim. The reserve was never meant to replace a steady supply, only to buy time in a crisis. The crisis spread beyond energy. Industries from plastics to automakers faced shortages and soaring costs. Production lines ground to a halt, workers were sent home, and the ripple effects threatened to drag the entire economy into recession. Gas prices jumped by up to 30 cents per gallon in days, fueling public outrage. Across the country, drivers waited in long lines, tempers flared, and families worried about how they'd afford their daily commutes or keep their homes heated. The president, trapped between protectionist supporters and desperate business leaders, faced mounting pressure. Every decision seemed to carry enormous risk, and the administration struggled to balance political realities with the urgent needs of the nation. Governors warned of economic catastrophe if oil didn't start flowing again. State leaders pleaded for federal action, fearing job losses, business closures, and a wave of public anger that could upend local economies. The crisis exposed just how deeply the U.S. relied on Canada and how little it had prepared for disruption. Analysts pointed to years of warnings that had gone unheeded, and the public began to question the wisdom of putting so many eggs in one basket. The American public, for the first time, felt the true cost of energy dependence. Protests erupted in cities and towns, and families faced tough choices as bills soared and uncertainty loomed. The administration's gamble had backfired spectacularly. What was once seen as a calculated risk now looked like a historic miscalculation, leaving the nation searching for answers and a way out of the crisis. Canada's pressure campaign went far beyond oil, reaching into every corner of the continent's energy landscape. While oil often grabs the headlines, it was just the beginning of a much broader strategy. Canadian leaders recognized that their country's energy resources, spanning oil, natural gas, hydroelectricity, and even nuclear power, were deeply woven into the fabric of North American life. Alberta, for example, didn't just rely on oil. The province threatened to review and potentially restrict natural gas exports, a move that would tighten the squeeze on U.S. energy supplies and send shockwaves through American industries and households that depend on Canadian gas to keep the lights on and homes heated. Meanwhile, Hydro-Quebec hinted at restricting electricity exports to New England and New York, regions that rely heavily on clean, affordable Canadian power. The mere suggestion sent chills through state governments and utility companies, who suddenly faced the prospect of blackouts or soaring energy prices. Ontario joined the effort, threatening to impose surcharges on electricity sent to the Midwest. Even Canada's nuclear sector got involved, launching surprise inspections at cross-border facilities, actions that could disrupt power flows and create uncertainty for millions of Americans. Every region of the U.S. felt the pressure. From the Northeast to the Midwest, no one was safe from the consequences of Canada's coordinated campaign. The threat was real, and the anxiety was palpable. Canada's strategy was both bold and calculated. By showing it could control the switches, literally and figuratively, without destroying the system, Canada demonstrated just how much leverage it held over its southern neighbor. The U.S. administration found itself with few good options as the crisis escalated. Officials scrambled to respond, but the reality was clear. Canada's energy dominance left Washington with little room to maneuver. Canada's mastery of economic statecraft was on full display, using its vast energy resources as both shield and sword in a high-stakes diplomatic standoff. The message was unmistakable. Canada's influence extended far beyond pipelines, shaping the very foundation of North America's energy security and economic stability. The world watched the standoff with alarm and opportunity. Mexico, also under U.S. pressure, launched its own reviews of energy exports, hinting at a united North American front. The European Union, wary of U.S. trade policy, saw Canada's move as a warning about over-reliance on any single partner. In Asia, China, Japan, and South Korea rushed to secure Canadian oil, eager to diversify away from the Middle East. Canada's boldness transformed its global image, from a quiet middle power to a strategic heavyweight. Allies and rivals alike took note. Canada could now shape global energy flows. The crisis redrew the map of influence, with Canada at the center. The world would never see Canada the same way again. The political fallout was starkly different on each side of the border. In Canada, Carney's approval rating soared as the nation rallied behind his stand. He gained a powerful mandate, with little incentive to compromise. In the U.S., the president was squeezed by angry voters, business leaders, and governors warning of disaster. His administration's response was chaotic. Threats one day, talk of negotiations the next, projecting weakness. Carney, calm and resolute, could afford to wait as U.S. pain mounted. The crisis became a test of political will, and the smaller nation held the stronger hand. Economic leverage, not military might, was now the decisive force. The lesson: in a connected world, power comes from control over what others need most. The U.S. finally blinked, suspending tariffs and opening negotiations. Canada resumed oil exports, but the old trust was gone. Both nations began to diversify partnerships, wary of future dependence. For Canada, the crisis was a coming of age. Its energy leverage became a cornerstone of foreign policy. New trade deals with Asia followed, and Canadian businesses looked beyond the US for growth. The US learned the risks of antagonizing a neighbor with critical resources. A new era of cautious, pragmatic cooperation replaced old assumptions. The oil freeze marked the end of one chapter and the start of another. Canada had forced a superpower to reconsider its actions. The relationship endured, but it would never be the same. Canada's oil freeze was more than a trade dispute, it was a turning point in global power dynamics. By wielding its energy leverage, Canada stepped out of America's shadow and redefined the relationship. The crisis exposed the dangers of economic overdependence and the power of strategic independence. For the US, it was a lesson in the limits of using trade as a weapon against allies. In today's world, control over resources is as vital as military strength. Canada's actions provided a new playbook for middle powers everywhere. The taps are flowing again, but trust has been replaced by caution. In geopolitics, no friendship is unconditional, and leverage is everything.